In this chapter, you step back from individual contracts and look at the bigger economic framework that surrounds every real estate transaction. Real estate does not exist in a vacuum. Every list price, every offer, and every negotiation is shaped by the market system in which buyers and sellers operate. Real estate is an economic product bought, sold, and financed within a system where supply, demand, value, cost, and price constantly interact. You learn that supply is the amount of property available for sale or lease at a given time, while demand is the number of buyers or tenants who want and can afford that property. When demand is strong and supply is limited, prices tend to rise, and sellers gain leverage. When supply is abundant and demand is weak, prices soften, and buyers gain bargaining power. You see that real estate is unlike other products because supply cannot be quickly adjusted. You cannot manufacture more land, move houses to other locations, or instantly build new subdivisions when demand spikes. Zoning, permitting, construction, and financing all take time. As a result, oversupply and undersupply are common and can persist, making it essential for licensees to recognize where their local market sits on this spectrum and advise clients accordingly. You also learn that real estate is fundamentally a local business. National trends in interest rates, inflation, and economic growth create the backdrop. But what really matters is local job growth, in-migration or out-migration, changes in schools, transportation improvements, lifestyle preferences, and local regulation. Two markets can react very differently to the same national headline. A community with growing base employment and limited land may see rising prices even in a national slowdown, while a city losing major employers may struggle even in a national boom. Your job is to track both the big picture and local indicators such as new listings, pending sales, closed prices, days on market, vacancy levels, and construction activity, so you can interpret what buyers and sellers are actually experiencing. The chapter links price and value by introducing 4 key economic determinants of value: desire, utility, scarcity, and purchasing power. Desire is how much someone wants a particular property. Utility is how well the property meets the user's needs. Scarcity describes how limited the supply of similar properties is. Purchasing power is the buyer's financial ability to act, shaped by income, savings, credit, and interest rates. Price is the number that expresses these elements at a specific moment in a specific negotiation. As these components change, interest rates rise, preferences shift, new inventory appears, jobs are gained or lost, prices adjust. On the producer side, you see how productivity and costs shape a floor under pricing. Developers and builders must cover land, labor, materials, financing, overhead, and profit. If they cannot sell or lease space at prices that cover those costs, new construction slows or stops. Efficient producers who can build and operate at lower cost have more flexibility and a competitive advantage. The chapter then turns to the special economic characteristics of real estate that create distinct market dynamics. Real estate has inherent value because land is finite and necessary for homes, businesses, and infrastructure. Each parcel is unique in location, physical features, and legal attributes. So no two properties are ever exactly alike. Real estate is immobile. Demand must come to the property rather than the other way around. It is a liquid, meaning it cannot be quickly converted to cash without marketing, negotiation, and closing, and sometimes price concessions. It is slow to respond to change because new supply requires long lead times, and existing buildings cannot be easily removed or repurposed. Finally, real estate markets are decentralized and highly local, with each submarket having its own balance of supply, demand, and price behavior. You learn how supply and demand are measured differently for various property types. Residential supply and demand are typically expressed in dwelling units and households, while commercial and industrial markets focus on square footage of space and employment levels in user industries. Factors that influence supply include construction and development costs, availability, and terms of financing for builders and investors, expected returns, local master plans, zoning, density limits, and infrastructure capacity. Demand is driven by population trends, household formation, income levels, preferences, and most importantly, employment. Employment is presented as the engine of long-term real estate demand. Base employment consists of jobs in industries that bring outside money into the region, such as manufacturing, tourism, military installations, or export-oriented businesses. These base industries attract secondary and support jobs, suppliers, services, retailers, professionals, which together create total employment. Total employment generates the need for industrial and office space, retail locations, and housing, and provides the income to pay for them. You see the classic pattern in boom and bust communities. A new base industry arrives, jobs and population grow, demand for property surges, and prices rise. When that base employment disappears, businesses close, people leave, and demand collapses, leaving physical structures but little market. The chapter explains the real estate cycle using 3 key concepts: construction, vacancy, and absorption. In an undersupplied market with low vacancy and rising rents or prices, developers respond by building. As new projects are completed, supply grows, and vacancy moves toward a normal range, often described as equilibrium. If construction overshoots demand, oversupply emerges, vacancy rises, and prices or rents weaken. At that point, new construction slows or stops, and the market rests, while excess space is gradually absorbed through population growth, business expansion, and normal turnover. As vacancy declines and pricing stabilizes or begins to rise, conditions again become attractive for new construction and the cycle repeats. Because of the time lag between recognizing an imbalance and completing projects, markets are almost always in motion rather than perfectly balanced. Finally, you study the many forces that influence supply and demand in real estate. Local factors include land availability, infrastructure capacity, construction costs, lender appetite for real estate loans, and changes in the local economic base. National influences include monetary policy, the general level of interest rates, inflation, and broader economic cycles. International influences and currency movements can affect foreign investment, tourism, and export industries, especially in larger or globally connected markets. Governmental influences operate at every level: zoning and land use regulations, building codes, environmental rules, tax policy, incentives, and even building moratoria can shape what gets built, where, and at what cost. Understanding how these forces interact helps you read current conditions and talk with clients about both risks and opportunities. Review summary. In this chapter, you learn that real estate operates within a larger market system, where supply, demand, value, cost, and price are constantly interacting. You saw that supply is slow to adjust because land is finite and development takes time, leading to periods of oversupply and undersupply that cannot be quickly corrected. You explored how value reflects desire, utility, scarcity, and purchasing power, and how price simply expresses that value in a specific transaction between buyer and seller. You discovered that real estate is fundamentally local, shaped by neighborhood-level conditions, even while national interest rates and economic trends provide the backdrop. You studied the special economic characteristics of real estate: uniqueness, immobility, illiquidity, slow response, and decentralized markets, and how they produce a cyclical pattern of undersupply, equilibrium, oversupply, and correction. You learned how supply and demand are measured for different property types, and how base and total employment drive long-term demand for space and housing. Finally, you saw how local, national, international, and governmental influences all play a role in speeding up or slowing down the real estate cycle in your area. Discussion. Why does the immobility and illiquidity of real estate make its market cycles different from those of products like clothing or electronics? Answer: because properties cannot be moved to follow demand and cannot be sold instantly without a lengthy process. Supply cannot be quickly reduced in weak markets or expanded in strong ones. This creates slower, sometimes more dramatic cycles as markets work through periods of surplus or shortage. How does base employment eventually translate into demand for residential property? Answer: base employment brings in outside dollars and creates jobs. Workers in those jobs need places to live, shop, and receive services. As base industries expand, total employment rises, population grows, households form, and demand for rentals and owner-occupied homes increases, along with demand for supporting retail and service space. Why is it dangerous for an investor or seller to base decisions only on past peak sales without looking at current supply, vacancy, and construction trends? Answer: past peak sales reflect conditions that may no longer exist. If supply has increased, vacancy has risen, or new construction is flooding the market, prices may be softening. Ignoring current indicators can lead to overpricing, unrealistic expectations, or investments based on outdated assumptions about rents and values. How do government zoning decisions and building moratoria influence future values and market behavior? Answer: zoning and moratoria control where and how much new development can occur. Restrictive zoning or temporary bans on new building can create artificial scarcity that pushes prices up, while upzoning or infrastructure expansions can enable more supply and change the character and value of an area over time. Understanding plan changes helps clients anticipate how value may shift in the future. Closing remarks. Market economics is the invisible framework behind every CMA you prepare, every pricing conversation you have, and every strategy you design for a buyer or seller. You cannot control interest rates, employment trends, or government policy, but you can understand how they impact supply, demand, and value in your local market. When you combine that understanding with solid contract and financing knowledge from earlier chapters, you move from simply working transactions to advising clients with insight. As you continue into later chapters on value, financing, and risk management, the concepts from market economics will help you connect individual properties to the broader forces that shape real estate opportunities over time.